afternoon, Hartford, and welcome again to another session of Voices of Veterans, brought to you by Steve Fournier, an Air Force veteran, and myself, Dave Yano, an Army veteran of Vietnam. And we're here using the equipment that Hartford Public Access Television allows us to use and has given us some basic training on, and their staff, especially Mike, is very helpful and has helped us get rolling here. So this is a resource that we have been using for the past 2 years now to bring you the voices of veterans, mostly through reading from books written by veterans, and several sessions we've actually had other veterans on as guests. I've had a Vietnam veteran on. That's Bill Potvin, and I've had another, an Afghan veteran who's a former Marine on, and I've had a few other people on to talk about various issues that are concerning Americans. But today, I'm going to start off by reading from Steve Fournier's book called Current Invective, Crank's Chronology by Stephen Fournier. This is called The Price of Dishonor, written on May 9th, 2009. There's something Americans should know about bombing civilians. If you can't count them, they don't count. That's the rule being applied this week by the U.S. media, working in tandem with the Marine Corps. And it's the reason you may not have heard that the Marine pilots bombed houses in Afghanistan a couple of days ago. International Red Cross observers say U.S. aircraft operating in the western province of Farah killed dozens of civilians, including many women and children. Eyewitness accounts tell of truckloads of bodies carted away for burial. Nobody counted them, and they're all in the ground now. The U.S. media, suppressing most of the story, seems to be reluctant to report on the massacre because they're not sure there are enough dead babies to make it worthwhile. Lately, they've been spewing the Pentagon line, on no evidence whatsoever, that the hapless Afghans, women and children, were killed by something other than the bombs that fell on them, or that they were herded into harm's way by America's enemies. The truth that the media can't report is that America is the enemy. You and I are the enemy. Rich and poor, black, white, and brown, mother and brother, we are aggressive enemies of peace, unattainable in the presence of occupying army of tens of thousands of heavily armed American soldiers. We are enthusiastic enemies of self-determination, impossible in a country under foreign occupation. We are unabashed enemies of the rule of law, which forbids armed incursions of all kinds except in self-defense. We are unrepentant enemies of life itself. So little concern we do show for the children of farmers and herdsmen blown to bits by our soldiers. Up till a few months ago, we would chalk it all up to rogue government in Washington. That rationalization evaporated in November when we had a chance to oust the crooks in charge. We didn't do it. In fact, our esteemed current president promised explicitly to keep the mayhem going, and we seem to have voted for that. He's delivering. It's a dead babies by the truckload, and he claims to be proud of the boys and girls we send over there to keep the blood flowing. The soldiers know they are not heroic, not brave, but cowardly with their body armor, their pilotless bombers, and their shoot-first rules of engagement. They know that they are not so much soldiers as terrorists roaring through town and village with guns at the ready. They know that they are dishonored by what the rest of us so foolishly refer to as service. And they know that the civilians at home neither understand nor care about their shame and sadness. Military commanders fend surprised at the number of soldiers killing themselves. They should acknowledge that this is the price of cowardice, of brutality, of lawlessness, of dishonor. These are the hallmarks of 21st century warfare, American style, and that's no cure for dishonor except self-destruction. Some drink themselves to death. Some end up on the street. Some buy a dozen roses for mom and then put a gun to their heads. That was written by one veteran who surely knows. And if you're interested, Steve's book is called Current Invective. Check it out on Amazon. Now I'm going to read something interesting to you written by one of the Afghan detainees at Guantanamo. It's called I Was Detainee 441, Mansour Adayafi, and it's reprinted from August 17th issue of the Boston Globe. The first time I came face to face with Americans was in the fall of 2001, after an Afghan warlord sold me to the United States for bounty money. I had been shackled and left naked and hooded for I don't know how long. When someone pulled the hood off of my head, the first thing I saw were 5 or so American soldiers dressed like Rambo, all pointing rifles at me, their laser sights lighting up my chest. I heard yelling in English, and an interpreter translated for me. "Where is Osama bin Laden? Where is Mullah Omar? What's the next target?" I was 18 years old. I wasn't an Al-Qaeda or Taliban fighter. I was a student researcher, and I had been kidnapped by militia on the highway outside of Kunduz weeks before the United States invaded, a common practice among the warlords at that time. During my early captivity, the warlord kept me in a compound where I taught his daughter Arabic while he tried to ransom me to the Saudis. When I heard that the Americans had invaded Afghanistan, I thought I was going to be saved. I didn't know that before they invaded, the United States dropped leaflets offering life-changing amounts of money for Al-Qaeda and Taliban fighters. I was neither, but my captor could get more money for me this way. Like many Guantanamo prisoners, I was sold to the United States for bounty money in the early days of the Afghan war. I don't know if the American public knew this was going on, but this was something that was happening quite a bit. I knew Afghani farmers who were sold by rival neighbors. I knew a Yemeni man injured in a car accident who had traveled to Pakistan for brain surgery where he was sold. I knew journalists, cooks, aid workers, engineers, and many more. There were so many of us. The Americans opened the Guantanamo detention camp exactly 4 months after 9/11 to detain and interrogate men and boys, mostly innocents, sold to the United States as alleged fighters and terrorists. A 2006 Seton Hall Law School report documents this. In the early days of Guantanamo, when we lived like animals in cages, when we had no idea where we were and why we were being imprisoned, we tried to convince our captors that they had made a mistake. I saw that the Americans were angry and afraid, and that they wanted justice for what had happened on 9/11. I couldn't even imagine a building over 100 stories tall. I felt sad for the innocent people who were killed and for their families. Killing innocents is not part of Islam, but I didn't have anything to do with it, and I thought that when the Americans understood that, they would let me go. We all thought this. We were called many things at Guantanamo, but to most people we became detainees, a name that implied that our situation was temporary, but one which allowed us to be held indefinitely without charges outside of the United States and international law. Stripped of my name, I became detainee 441. I spent nearly 15 years detained, 8 of them in solitary confinement. In all, 779 men have been imprisoned at Guantanamo over almost 20 years. U.S. political leaders and the military have worked hard to portray us as the worst of the worst, and yet as early as the spring of 2002, the generals in charge knew that most of us had little intelligence value. Even the Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld complained in 2003 to stop sending dirt farmers to Guantanamo, and yet the prison remained open, becoming another front in the war on terror, a battle lab where enhanced interrogations were tested and justified. During that time, I saw guards, interrogators, and even generals tear themselves apart, trying to reconcile what they knew to be true and right in their hearts with the impossible mission they had been given, to detain and interrogate men and treat them with such inhumanity. I know of guards who committed suicide. I knew a Muslim chaplain and West Point graduate who was harassed and charged with terrible crimes. And I know countless other American military whose lives were turned upside down because of Guantanamo. No one who came through Guantanamo left unharmed. President Biden has now promised we're ending the longest war. I am no historian or prominent political figure, but I have seen the war on terror up close, and I know that America's forever war can't be over until other fronts opened up to support it have been shut down too. The U.S. government cannot separate Afghanistan from Guantanamo. I know now that America is not the country I once thought it was, but that does not mean it's too late to turn back. America must begin to reconcile with its past and with policies enacted to carry out wars like the one in Afghanistan, policies that transformed the United States into the kind of enemy it once feared, one capable of breaking its own laws and moral codes. As Biden himself recently argued, the United States cannot afford to remain tethered to policies creating a response to a world as it was 20 years ago. Guantanamo and the current state of Afghanistan embody the failures of the war on terror caused by the politics of fear. While the United States can no longer control what happens in Afghanistan, it owns Guantanamo and controls its fate entirely. When I was released in 2016 and sent to Serbia against my wishes, I had never been charged with a crime. In fact, the tribunal determined that I wasn't who they thought I was. Today, 39 men remain imprisoned at Guantanamo at an estimated annual cost of $13 million per prisoner. Only 2 men have been convicted of crimes, while 10 others face possible charges, though any evidence to support conviction is tainted by years of torture. 9 men have been approved for release, and the remaining 18 are being held indefinitely without charges. History may not look kindly on Biden pulling out of Afghanistan and letting it fall to the Taliban, but if he can close Guantanamo and reckon with America's plunge into torture and arbitrary detention, he could be remembered as the president who helped correct America's moral compass. Otherwise, America may be gone from Afghanistan, but the forever war continues. I found this article was sent to me by the Hartford Catholic worker, Christopher Duclos, they live in Hartford on Clark Street by the Clark School. I had Christopher on the show once because he had visited Iraq during the Iraq War, and he'd also been to Palestine and had seen what the war had cost the people, the Palestinians and the Israeli people themselves, because they're in a forever war now. In fact, we'll continue to be in a forever war unless we can learn from these mistakes. One other thing I wanted to talk about briefly today, I was watching on TV today as General Milley, Secretary of Defense Austin, and General McKenzie were being grilled by Congress on what happened in the last couple of days in Afghanistan, in Kabul, when the government collapsed and the American soldiers were trying to get out as many of the Afghan people who'd fled to the airport as they possibly could. And during that time, while just before Biden became president of the United States, Milley had conversed with his fellow generals in China about the fact that he would make sure that there would be no launch of an attack on China without their foreknowledge that it was going to happen. In other words, he had decided that he was going to follow his soldiers' duty and to protect and defend the United States Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And at that time, as the head of the military, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he felt that there was a possibility of a threat to the United States Constitution by the very president at that time, President Trump. This is a soldier's duty. And what's happened with us is that Congress has surrendered its constitutional power to the War Powers Act, and they do not declare war. The last time Congress declared war was in the Second World War, when we declared war against Japan and Germany. That was the last time a declaration of war was issued by Congress. They're the ones with the sole power to declare war. They are the ones who should be responsible for what is happening today. Instead, they've shirked their responsibility. And even above that, the ones who are more responsible than Congress is the American people. And while you may say the American people have been led astray or haven't received the truth from the media, what you have to do as the American people, you have to search for the truth. And you have to stand up for what you believe in. And if you feel your government has done wrong and has committed illegal acts, you need to speak out on it. And that's what various groups of veterans have done. That's what the Vietnam Veterans Against the War did when they engineered the Winter Soldier hearings in Congress in 1971. Combat veterans from Vietnam threw their medals back on the White House porch and stood up and said, "We have committed atrocities in Vietnam. We are waging an illegal, unconstitutional war against the Vietnamese people." And then when the Iraq War got started, a similar group of veterans organized the Iraq Veterans Against the War, and they also held their Winter Soldier hearings, but there was hardly any media that would advertise what was happening, that covered it. The media ran away from it. The media hid it. And this is what the American people have got to realize is happening. The truth is being hidden from them, but they have to actively search for the truth. They have to go after the truth. And that's in effect what this program is all about. We're a voice, a small voice, but a necessary voice, and a voice that won't let itself be shut up. We will come back to this studio again and again, just like we did for the past 2 years, and bring you the voices of other veterans and other people who are trying to get the truth out about what's really going on and about where the responsibility truly lies. And it's the American people that need to exercise that responsibility. They need to look in the mirror and see what they've done. Because right now we're at war with ourselves, and that's why there are so many veterans who have committed suicide in years past, and so many veterans who are homeless, so many veterans who have become drug addicted because they're trying to bury the pain. And I will read shortly just a small piece from this other book called Un-American by Eric Edstrom, a West Point graduate who served in Afghanistan. This chapter is called What Has Been Lost. My vision of death is informed by the memories of bloody, ketamine soldiers carried on litters to Black Hawk medevac helicopters, of a wounded friend asking if I have a needle or something to drain the blisters on his leg stump, of flowers and stacked pebbles or miniature Johnny Walker nips resting in tribute against gray cemetery headstones of soldiers rendered joyless, of soldiers who can't get a job, who can't keep a job, who don't want a job but need a job, of soldiers who, over a break during classes at an inpatient mental health ward, avoid eye contact, referring to life like it's a rudderless affair, of soldiers who have committed suicide, of my former soldier's Facebook posts as he risks death by kidney disease exacerbated by alcoholism, deaths of despair as they're known. Family and friends, I've kept it long enough. I'm stage 5 kidney disease. I lost my left kidney in 2012 and have slowly been losing my right. I also have a problem with alcohol. This is my acceptance. Please forgive me, a former soldier. My vision of empathy, to imagine the other side, is informed by memories of burning fields and OH-58 Kiowas firing rockets overhead, of mud homes caved in from high explosives, of Afghan civilians and soldiers clutching various bloody stumps and holding their lacerated faces, of a dead baby brought to our outpost, of the boy in a white tunic dead on his back with the bloodsome stain over his heart, of broken glass beside a passenger bus shot to Swiss cheese by the U.S. military, Not all of the destruction was due to the U.S. military, far from it, but all of it was on account of us being there, in their country, illegally. It's still surprising to me when I look down at my hands typing this sentence that these same hands were responsible for a small part of that total devastation. My vision of opportunity costs is more complex. It's not simply imagining the direct costs of war, the number of dead, injured, or traumatized. It's the act of imagining the negative space, the hole in the universe created by the absence of people, and the substitution of physical health for physical pain and disability, or of spending trillions to create war debt instead of putting those funds to better use almost anywhere else. Now I can see the hole in the universe left by our wars. If we are going to reimagine America's relationship with the military spending and war, we need to muster political will. And political will seems to come only from sufficient outrage, shame, or embarrassment. If we look at the damage, it is beyond comprehension. It can't be undone. We shoot the sick, the young, the lame, we do our best to maim. Because the kills all count the same, napalm sticks to kids. Napalm sticks to kids. Napalm sticks to kids. Flying low across the trees, pilots doing what they please, dropping frags on refugees. Napalm sticks to kids. This is a napalm sticks to kids is a U.S. Army marching cadence. A 2015 report from Physicians for Social Responsibility, a physician-led organization that was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, concluded that the war has directly or indirectly killed around 1 million people in Iraq, 220,000 in Afghanistan, and 80,000 in Pakistan. That is a total of around 1.3 million. If other war zones such as Yemen were included, the figure would be higher. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is what has happened that the United States needs to recognize. And today, the American people need to look in the mirror and realize that they have the obligation, we have the obligation to stand up and put an end to these wars. We are the ones who are at fault. We are the ones to blame for what happened in Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, Africa, and all over the planet. The people of the United States need to exercise their constitutional duties, just like General Milley did when he contacted the Chinese generals to tell them that he would inform them if the then president of the United States, was about to launch an attack on them. That is a true soldier's duty. That's what is every soldier's responsibility. To speak the truth, to no longer dishonor ourselves. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of this session, and we hope to be back in a number of weeks with a new session of Voices of Veterans. And thank you for your attention, and thank you for being here with us.
Okay.
Did I catch it?